We are live. Well, I hope we are. A very good evening to all our audience that are watching from, I'm sure, all around the UK. We've got us set up on YouTube. I think we might be on Twitter as well. So wherever you're watching, however you're watching, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you along to Wild Live with myself, Cel Spellman. Now, you're probably thinking, if you've watched one of these Wild Lives before, it's not usually you that's sat here, and I know. But this is we're doing things a little bit different because Craig is away, and the Wildlife Trust have very kindly invited me to host today's Wild Live, which is an absolute privilege. One, because I know how important these conversations are. Two, because it really is a special thing for myself to get involved with the Wildlife Trust community, being a very proud ambassador. And number three, it's spaces like this that really do fill me with hope and inspiration, to be joined and surrounded by like-minded people, to be talking about this crisis that does affect us all, but working towards finding solutions, I think is an incredibly special and important thing. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be getting stuck in to a very big question. It's a question that I think isn't quite being asked enough yet, but it is one that I know that many industries, working places, companies, corporations are all going to have to be asking very, very soon. And that is, can every job be a green job? As we're all well aware, given, of course, the climate crisis, the nature crisis, we've got a cost of living crisis. I mean, it's a lot. It feels like this crisis is all over at the moment. One part of that solution is, of course, looking to greening our industries, greening our economy. And with that comes having green jobs. So that is what we're kind of using as our umbrella. But underneath all that, there's going to be so many subtopics for us to get into, and I can't wait to do that, because helping me do that, I have got an incredible expert panel of young people that are going to be joining me to really help dig into this question and try and find some answers. Now, before we get in, a little bit of housekeeping. As we know, this live is for all of us. This is a community live, and we want you involved in this conversation as much as possible. So you can get involved throughout the show. Maybe you can send some comments saying hello, let us know where you're watching from. But if you've also got any burning questions, or maybe you've kind of got an opinion, or you think, oh, actually, I think this on that, you can send it in, and there is a whole host of, well, I was going to say working beavers, because, beavers, good joke, move on. There's plenty more of them coming tonight. They are behind the scenes working away, and they can feed me in your questions and comments. So please, please, please do get involved, and they're going to pop up here, and I'll get into them as we go. And a little bit later on, after we've met all our panelists, we're going to have a massive Q&A from your questions. So if I haven't read them out before you've sent them, don't worry. A little bit later on in the show, we'll be getting to them. But I guess, without further ado, you don't want to hear me waffling on anymore. Let's get into meeting our wonderful panel that are joining me this evening. Oh, we've had hello to Laura from Notts Wildlife Trust. She said hello. Thank you so much. She's very excited, and is also very excited to say go Mia. So maybe that's a great place to start, because one of my panelists comes in the form of Mia Cross. So I'm sure that's one of your friends there. Mia is very excited that you're joining us. Mia is from Keeping It Wild. She's a member there and is also part of the Nottingham Wildlife Trust. Also alongside Mia on today's panel, I'm joined by Eleanor Lampard, who is a youth advocacy officer from Lancashire Wildlife Trust. That's up where my neck of the woods is as well. Alongside Eleanor, we've got Ryan-Leah, who is a communications and digital campaigns officer at Action for Conservation. And to complete this brilliant lineup, I'm also joined by James Melling, who is a wilder campaigns officer at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. So another fellow in order there as well, which is a treat. So we're going to be getting into meeting all our panelists, but I'm going to begin by first of all introducing again Eleanor Lampard, who is the Youth Advocacy Officer at Lancashire Wildlife Trust. Eleanor, I'm going to come to you straight away, and before we get into some of the big questions, just for everybody watching, can you tell us a bit about yourself and briefly explain your role at Lancashire Wildlife Trust?
Yeah, so I'm from the Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside Wildlife Trust. So we cover a whole load of the north, and I am the Youth Advocacy Officer. So yeah, it kind of like it says, I do what it says in the title, really. I advocate for young people to be involved in more of the decision making of the Wildlife Trust as an organisation, because we need young people. And when I mean young people, I work with 11 to 25-year-olds. So we're like a huge range of people in the room, in the discussions, talking to people in kind of senior positions, consulting on important conservation matters and kind of the future of the planet. So my job is to kind of bridge the gap between young people and kind of the rest of the workforce. And yeah, there's loads of ways we do that. So we have a really successful youth council. So it's going into its 4th year now, which is really exciting. And that's 13 to 25-year-olds who sit on the board for a whole year. And they have proper formal quarterly meetings, and they discuss with the trustees, they discuss with our CEO, with directors of marketing and conservation, important matters in conservation, but also in political campaigning, environmental campaigning. So my job is essentially to really support that, organise them to have media appearances, and to also build their skills, like you said, into the what you'd call the green sector, because unfortunately it's really difficult to get into conservation. So building these skills and having this kind of on their resume is really important, and also lets them into the world of conservation, which is more than, digging holes on peat bogs or working at a zoo or doing typical environmental campaigning. There's so much going on in the green sector, as we'll call it, or the conservation world. So this program kind of gives them an insight into that. And then I also facilitate a youth nature and awareness group. So that's for young people who don't necessarily have loads of time or aren't quite up. They're not sure what they really want to do yet, but they'd like to do some things for the planet. They know what's going on and they're not sure where to start. So that group is kind of a stepping stone point. And there was also loads of people wanted to be on the youth council, and there's only 15 positions. So it was somewhere for people to go who still had that passion. And I think there's strength in numbers. So bringing people together, and letting them feel like they're supported and they can support each other. So yeah, essentially that's the heart of my role.
So Eleanor, the question I wanted to ask you, given how long you've worked in the youth advocacy department within those trusts, have you noticed an increase in the number of people wanting to get involved with kind of the work the Wildlife Trust are doing, but just generally when it comes to trying to, get involved with environmental and nature positions and areas of kind of conservation work?
Yeah, for sure. I've also just noticed an increase in environment in general. It doesn't necessarily mean it translates into people wanting to work in conservation. And I think this feeds into the question that not all branded green jobs are in conservation or in what I guess the government would deem green industries. There's people who are working within, the arts who really want to raise awareness for the environment and nature. In filmmaking, there's been loads of documentaries coming out. In fashion's a massive polluter. So I have actually just noticed a general movement towards kind of conscious consumerism, but also just recognizing that there is changes around us. There is actually a lack of biodiversity in the UK massively, and people are kind of waking up to that. I think I'm biased because obviously I work in a youth role where people want to come into conservation. So I'm only really getting like really keen young people who would love to be in typical conservation rangers or officers, and some fantastic young people who are actually phenomenal. They are bird watchers at like the age of 14, and some love insects, and one girl we had loved frogs, and then we all decided we loved frogs. So like it's like passion is all consuming. She always says a bucket of toads keeps the sadness away, and she used to go and collect toads every year. So yeah, there's just loads of people about who are really into nature, but I think there's actually a growing movement of people who are also recognizing that liking the environment is no longer uncool. When I was a teenager, I was the environmental one and it was uncool. And now people are hopefully starting to move towards actually, it's cool to like the environment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I remember something very similar for myself. And I think hopefully that's kind of a small example, though, of the shift in consciousness across the board, kind of with all people kind of accepting that we are in a climate and nature crisis, and also starting to look their journey of what role can they play individually, and also can we play if we all work together. Let's bring it then back then to kind of the big question that we're asking today, and I guess it comes with that, as we are seeing more and more people get involved in this conversation and want to get stuck into this space. You were quite keen to answer this question, which is the big one we started with, which is, can every job be a green job? As we look to the future and we're moving forward, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think I asked for this question because I want to be really harsh on it. I think that it's almost the wrong question to be asking. We currently live in a societal model which is capitalism and mass consumerism that prioritizes growth and profit and productivity over one that prioritizes happiness of people and planet and the well-being of people and planet. And I think that we have to tackle this issue first, and we have to have mass societal disruption of the type of life we're living in these rich nations, where we tackle the wealth disparity and we tackle the way we have a relationship with the natural world and the way we use natural resources. And I think the word sustainability is overused, and we're currently not using anything sustainably. What we need to do is move into a societal model where we work in harmony with nature, where we use nature-based solutions, where we regenerate, not just like we don't sustainably do anything. We have to regenerate what we have lost. And I think only then can we then move towards this discussion where we're talking about green jobs, because then we can kind of model the green jobs around this new societal structure, so everything can be a green job. And there's certain things that maybe never will be, but currently, no way are we moving towards a future that everything can be a green job, because we just don't live that way. You can't have mass consumerism, you can't have the broken, fractured relationship we have with nature and have everything green jobs. So that would be my hot take on it.
I don't know. And I think, Eleanor, I think it's a brilliant hot take. I think it's a very important hot take. And I think actually when you're so right, when we look at that bigger picture, it is from top to bottom, left to right, across the board in every area. It needs change and we need to shift it. I will ask though, and as I say, I'm in complete agreement with what you say, is there room though, do you think, do we almost need some green jobs that can help spur along that change? Because while there aren't any, and I know what you're saying in there, obviously until the system exists for us to live in that, but do you not think we need some in this system to try help us move to that system and that kind of new way, that new societal structure that you're talking about?
Oh yeah, for sure. But again, I don't think it should be 10,000 conservation officers. I think it needs to be more conservation officers, but more people in political powers. There needs to be more environmental campaigners who are taken seriously. There needs to be people who are funded to go into trade jobs. We currently don't have enough people to insulate the homes. Even if everybody wanted to insulate the homes, there's not enough trained trades people to do that. The same goes with fixing EV battery cars, upgrading the grid, architectures, engineers. We're just missing a whole section of society. So although I would love for everybody to work in nature and to be connected to it and to have those kind of jobs, we have to focus on a really holistic approach. And I'd be really interested to what everybody else on this panel thinks as well about how we get there, because I think we need all in, basically. We do need all in. And of course, you have to have green jobs to get to that, utopian model that I would love to see happen relatively soon.
I mean, do you know what, Eleanor? Then we're going to open that up to the panel once we've managed to meet them all, because this is one debate I want to continue. And we've had some great comments coming in for you already as well. And also, I think it's worth saying there, Eleanor, you perfectly almost summarised the scale of the problem and the scale of the system in which we're talking about. And I think it was really beautifully put. Jenny Floyd, who's watching, hi to you. Jenny also agreed and said, totally agree about the better societal model. We also had Papa Smurf, who knew one of the Smurfs would be watching. It says, brilliant stuff, Eleanor. More power to you. So, Eleanor, I mean, what a great way to start this Wild Live. And we'll be coming back to you in just a little bit, but we're going to move on to meet one of our other guests shortly. That was Eleanor, everyone. And gosh, sign me up for more Wild Lives with this panel already. Tonight, it's such a pleasure to be joined by all those that have said hi so far. We've got people from Swanage, Norfolk, Walsall, Bath, Conway Valley, West Sussex, Newbury, and there's so many others out there that we've not mentioned. So really appreciate everybody's time. time on this Thursday evening to get involved in this very important conversation. So I would now like to introduce next, and I can tell you, Mia, we've got some friends that are watching from Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, as well, of course, your home Wildlife Trust in Nottingham. Mia Cross is a Keeping It Wild member, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you onto our chat now, Mia. Could you, first of all, tell us a bit about yourself and about your involvement with Nottingham Wildlife Trust?
Yep, so I'm Mia. I'm a member of Keeping It Wild, which is a youth group connected to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. It's for people aged 13 to 25, and we do a range of things, including practical conservation, fundraising, campaigning, public engagement, lots of things. I've been a part of the group now for 6 years, and it's really changed my life. It's a really great group of people. We do all sorts of social activities as well. It introduces a lot of people to wildlife, which I don't know if all nature groups do that. A lot of nature groups feel like they're just for people who are already interested in a certain species or a certain habitat or something, or their local nature reserve, whereas ours brings in people from all backgrounds, lots of people who've maybe never engaged with nature before, makes them nature nerds, which is brilliant.
Amazing. Do you know, I love that as well. I think it's such a beautiful thing when, you know, kind of a passion kind of becomes bigger than just a passion. And like you say, to hear you say that it almost changed your life is very special to hear, Mia. And how have you found the Keeping It Wild program? You know, how has it been going so far? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's going really well. We have about 25 regular members at this point. Our main project, which has been our main project for the last 4 or 5 years now, is a nature reserve in Nottingham city centre called Woodthorpe Meadow. It's part meadow, part woodland reserve, and we manage that completely by ourselves. We wrote the management plan ourselves. We felled trees, we planted wildflowers, we engaged with the public by doing events on the space. So yeah, that's what we're doing at the moment. We put signage up to try and reduce dog fouling and antisocial behaviour on site, and it's really cool to see a group of young people doing that completely by themselves, with no impact from the wider trust.
Looking at that project, which sounds awesome, can you tell me how long have you been managing it, and already what are kind of some of the changes you've seen to the area in which you're managing?
So we acquired the site in, I think it was January 2018, so it's been about 4.5 years now. So in that time, we've seen a drastic reduction in antisocial behaviour on site. Unfortunately, there was a lot of drug use on site, and we used to pick up a lot of needles during our litter picks on site. And we get a lot less now. In fact, in the past few litter picks, we've picked up no needles. We've had no need for a sharp spin. We also have taken out a lot of the holly on site because that was smothering of the tree species and meaning that new growth couldn't occur. So that's been our main project in the woodland part of the reserve. And then the meadow part of the reserve has just been regularly mowing the meadow and taking the grass off site to try and encourage more wildflower growth on that part of the reserve.
Can I ask as well, just out of curiosity, obviously we know how incredibly nature depleted the UK is. I think we're up there as being one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, and the biodiversity crisis globally is incredibly worrying. Have you noticed an increase though in wildlife, in those little insects, in those little bugs, maybe in some birds returning to the area? Have you noticed anything like that, or do you still think it's a bit early days to see that kind of impact?
I mean, yeah, 4 years isn't so long in kind of trying to revive a not totally managed reserve. We've definitely seen some improvement we've started a species list, and we've got so many species on that species list now, loads of great invertebrates. We're starting to see the return of some wildflowers that hadn't been seen on site for a while but had been previously recorded on site. So we're seeing some really positive change.
Wow. Amazing. I love to hear that. And I think it's those little pearls, those little drops of positive and good news that I think we all need, that also just enforce the fact that given time and space and with the right effort and the right team behind it, anything is possible. To someone listening then, and kind of given the work that you've already done, Mia, and the road you've gone down, if someone listening here has got similar passions, and they're thinking, right, well, how do I go about being a part of a team like Mia is, what would you say to them? What is the journey in?
I mean, that is a really big question, but I think all wildlife trusts now are working really hard to start up youth programs if they don't already have one for many ages, not just ages like younger ages where they might have been already established groups. So I'd say, one, look for your local wildlife trust youth group to see if there's one nearby that does maybe practical conservation or more of a campaigning type of thing. If there isn't one for your wildlife trust yet, you could get in contact and ask for them to start one, but you could also look at other charities like the RSPB. I know have a lot of youth engagement and other charities like that. And also all volunteering is open to everyone within the Wildlife Trust. So find out if there's any volunteering that's not particularly youth-based, but is in a reserve near you. And also, if you've got the time and are looking for further in education, looking for traineeships or internships, is really useful. They may not always be paid, which is obviously part of what we're talking about today. But if you can, doing something like that, getting work experience is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And off that, Mia, you know, given that the work you've done already, and as with all of you kind of people on the panel today, you know, I think you're doing incredibly brilliant, vital work and are really showcasing the best of young people. Will you now be looking further down the line when you start to look at what your career may look like, obviously, as you kind of get a little bit older? Are you going to be hopefully going to be doing something in the conservation sector, or would you think you're going to try and find maybe a green field or find a green space within an industry to work in? How can you see your career going?
Yeah, so I've just finished my second year of an ecology degree. And then I'm going on placement this year with the North Wales Wildlife Trust, doing a conservation placement for a year. So I'm really excited about that. And then after my third year at uni, I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet, but definitely in the conservation environmental sector. That might be research. It could be going on to do more study. It could be finding a job at hopefully a wildlife trust or a similar organisation. But yeah, I definitely want to have a long career in the conservation sector.
Beautiful. Well, listen, the conservation sector is better off for you being in it, Mia. I'll tell you that for free. Thank you so much there. That is Mia, everybody. And again, as I say, we're just going to have a quick introduction with all our panelists before we open it up to a big group discussion and put more of your questions to our guests. Now, we had a question here from Mike Ems, who asked, are there any other plans to set up similar youth groups within any other local wildlife trusts around the country? Well, Mike, you'll be pleased to know the answer is yes. Now, obviously, I work quite closely with the Wildlife Trust, being a very proud ambassador myself. And now, I think, as Mia mentioned, a lot of the trusts are running youth groups, and if they're not, they'll be creating them. All you have to do is get in touch with your local wildlife trust to find out what is available and what is the work that they are doing within that. And you never know, Mike, hopefully you might be able to lend a helping hand with that. Also, for you, Mia, we had a lovely comment come in from Jennifer Luddington Sounds, who says, what a really great project. And she loved hearing about how you started as well, which I think was really, really important as well. This video from Friends of the Earth, because we're asking about what a green job is, but I think sometimes, you know, we have phrases or certain kind of words that we don't necessarily or fully understand. So the whole kind of question of what is a green job and how can we define it? Well, I'm not going to try to do it because our friends at Friends of the Earth have made a short video that perfectly summarizes what a green job is. Let's take a look. That's a great little video there created from our friends at Friends of the Earth. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Okay, next guest I would like to introduce is Hannah Ryan-Leah, Communications and Digital Campaigns Officer at Action for Conservation. Let's begin, Hannah, by you telling us about your role and what it involves at Action for Conservation.
Thanks for having me. I think maybe first what I'll do is just give you like a really brief overview of who Action for Conservation are. We're super small. Loads of people haven't heard of us, so it might be helpful to know a bit about us. We're a really young charity. We're about 6-7 years old, and we work with young people aged 12 to kind of 18 across the UK, and we're essentially an environmental action, engagement, education charity. So yeah, we're all about making sure that young people across the country are kind of having their say on issues like the climate crisis, but also that they are feeling empowered to take action and do something about environmental issues in their local areas as well. So that's kind of like loosely what we do. Within that, I work as our communications and digital campaigns officer. So that essentially means I am responsible for all things comms. So that's like managing internal and external communications and processes, helping design communication strategies, managing social media, the website, and also like lots of content creation, which is really fun. So graphic design, I'm actually like self-taught in that, so not a massive specialist. But I design all our promotional materials and our resources and edit videos that we put out. So there's like tons that's involved within my role, which makes it really fun, keeps me really busy. But what the best part of it is kind of working with young people. So I work directly with our youth ambassadors and other young people that we work with. The majority of the content that we create is designed with young people in mind, if it isn't just designed and created by them like off the bat anyway. And so it's really important for us as a charity that we tell young people's stories and that these are authentic to their kind of the youth voice, and that we embed their voices at the heart of our work. And so we do that in a bunch of ways. We have youth trustees as well that kind of shape where the charity's going, the work that we're doing, and we're constantly getting feedback from young people that we work with to make sure that we're creating interesting and accessible and kind of engaging comms. Yeah, so that's kind of what we do. And I guess because we're talking about jobs within AFC, we don't really think of kind of conservation jobs or green jobs in any one specific way. We always try and think of it as more of a mindset, that we can all be eco-conscious and we all have the ability to shift and change the world in our own lives. And so, yeah, if we're going to ensure that all industries are kind of green or have jobs that are green, then we need people in every industry with those mindsets really like creating change from within. So, yeah, that's kind of loosely an overview, very quick.
If Very quick, and my goodness, Hannah, I mean, you just do a little bit then, do you? How many places you spin in?
Just a small bit, impressive. Yeah.
Just a small bit. But if I love that kind of idea, like you're saying, I think it kind of ties into a little bit of what we were talking about a little bit earlier, you know, was kind of, if we're saying that rather than seeing it as specifically a green job, as I kind of Eleanor said, if we're looking at a holistic point of view, and I love that idea of having kind of a green and eco-conscious mind just in any job of what you're doing. Do you find then if you're taking that, it's easy to kind of like, I don't know, breed that if people haven't been connected to nature from an early age? Do you think necessarily people need to have experienced nature to be able to have that mindset, I guess?
In short, no, I definitely don't think you do. I think like, yeah, all of those, approaching it in this holistic kind of broader picture way, I think definitely helps, because it just opens that door to more people who have had different experiences in life or different interests to kind of participating in, yeah, the environmental like sector and the movement more generally. I think in terms of young people, it's kind of less about them growing up in and around nature that prevents them from like wanting to get a green job or thinking about having a green job. And it's kind of, I think it's actually more about what is the expectation that we have when we're recruiting for those roles. The expectation from my experience is often that you need a degree, you have to have 4 years experience, you have to know how to do this X, Y, Z, like whatever it is. And actually, are we restricting the candidate pool? Do we have a really diverse pool of candidates with like lots of different experience, lots of different knowledge that might not be the typical CV? And I think it's kind of, thinking about that is a really important point. And I think also it's really important to think about the word young. Often these jobs or like positions that are for young people are actually pitched at kind of 16 to 25. And obviously that is young, it's younger than me. But we always miss, I feel like, this kind of 12 to 16 group who are really engaged, and maybe that's a really formative part of your teens when you're kind of growing up and developing your identity and sort of what your interests are, and maybe thinking about what you want to do for your A-levels or what you want to do for your career. And so I think it's really important that we can kind of consider that as well. So yeah, I think that's all really important. And I think a point that I really always kind of hark back to is that if you have had a really great transformative experience in nature, that is a privilege. Not all people, not all young people will have those experiences. They may never have visited a national park. They might live in a home that doesn't have a garden or balcony. There's like so many barriers to access in the natural world. But it doesn't mean that they're not connected in other ways, because it might be that there's interest built from kind of issues around social and racial injustice, or like food and cooking in the home, or like fashion or health or well-being. Like there's so many different ways that you can kind of get into a green job. It doesn't just have to come from having your feet like on the ground in nature, although that is great in my opinion.
I agree more, and I think actually as well that there is something to be said though for doing more for the people that maybe haven't had access to that nature, and making sure that it's still very much an open space. Given the variety of avenues you kind of presented there, and as I think we could have gone into it so much more, how difficult is it then for young people to go down those roads, and do you think there are enough opportunities out there as of yet for young people over the next few years to get into any of those spaces you've said?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we've definitely seen a massive shift in organisations across the board kind of building out more of their youth work. Like I remember when I started at Action for Conservation about 5 years ago, we were a tiny team, and we do a lot of work in secondary schools, essentially like working with young people to engage them with environmental issues, often young people that have maybe never encountered those topics before, and the kind of young people that I guess maybe media would present as like they don't care, they're indifferent to it. They're definitely not. I think it's how you approach those issues, and also they're the ones that arguably you want to be trying to work with. But when we were first doing that, I remember like no one was, we were made as an organisation because the provision for 12 to like 18-year-olds didn't exist. It like wasn't there in the same way it is now. And I think that that's not down to us at all. Like we work with who we work with, and we really love the work that we do with young people. We work with amazing young people. But I think also, you know, there's loads of youth activists that have really contributed to raising that profile. But back to your kind of, your question, I guess what I was saying there is that they've really changed the game in terms of the opportunities that there are now available to them, like now compared to 5 years ago. School strikes, Fridays for Future, all of those groups have really built the groundwork to kind of say, no, we're here. We want to be in the decision-making positions. We want to speak to truth to power. So give us a chance, give us a shot, like put us on at the table and let us make a decision. And so I think like it is still really hard. There's a lot of greenwashing about, and I think we try and look at opportunities like, are these meaningful for young people, and are they also interesting, are they fun? Like an opportunity is great, but it has to be the right opportunity as well. So I think that there are opportunities out there, but I think there could be more, and there could be more variety. And I think, you know, what I know with the young people that I work with is that they're interested in industries across the board addressing their practices and systems, and they want to be involved in those conversations, and they want to be involved in how all of that stuff develops. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more that could be kind of built on, but I think it's improved a lot in the last 5 years at least.
Yeah, it's a positive sign. We've moved in the right direction. As long as we're moving in the right direction, that's something. But I think, like you say, there's now we've made those first few steps. Let's start striving to make some big strides. And let's, I think, really kind of hopefully look to our peers and these industries and these workplaces to really kind of take this and run with it. And as you say, do even better than we are doing, not discrediting the work that's been done so far, largely down, ironically, to young people themselves. Massive thank you, Hannah. We'll come back to you in just a little bit. Let me get on to my final member on this brilliant panel, who comes in the form of James Melling, who is a Wilder Campaigns Officer at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. James, good evening. Pleasure to have you on here, my friend. Just for everyone watching and listening, please could you tell us about some of the work you do at Wildlife Trust and how did you get to doing it?
Hi, so I'm James, and as Cal said, I'm the Campaigns Officer at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. And my job's kind of like really quite broad. I do quite a range of things, and it involves everything from meeting with politicians, so I meet with MPs and councils and try and advise them and lobby them on sort of their environmental policy and what they should be doing. So I do that kind of stuff. I also do a lot of work around public engagement, trying to sort of inspire people to take action, trying to get people involved with nature, get them campaigning, get them supporting petitions, and get them putting pressure on the people with decision-making power. But then also probably the more exciting part of my job, which is just sort of come about in the last year, is I'm responsible for sort of youth engagement for our trust. So we've just set up a young campaigning group in Chester, and they're a group of sort of 16 to 26-year-old, and basically what they're doing is they're trying to create a nature-based campaign in Chester, trying to engage as many different people as possible, and trying to get Chester a greener place and a better place to live, essentially. And I'm hoping that's going to be the first of many groups that we're going to start up over in Cheshire. That's going to be hopefully a nice foundation to go with. So that's, I guess, what I do. I haven't always done this, though. For the last sort of 3 years, I've been at Cheshire working for the Wildlife Trusts. But before that, I used to be a teacher. So I was a high school teacher. So I've been working with young people for a good sort of 6 years now. And I've sort of worked with a variety of different people from different backgrounds. So for me, getting young people involved with nature and the environment, I think, is really important. I think then they're the future. They're the ones who are going to have to live with the actions of our society today. And I think it's really important we give them a voice and make sure that they have a say in their future, because without that, it's going to be such a challenge for them.
I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, you'd be a great person to ask this question then, when we're trying to when we're looking at engaging young people in this space, which then hopefully in turn will lead them on to wanting to maybe do some work centred around this passion and love that they found. How have you found it's $1 million question, this, James, but the effective way of engaging young people and bringing them into this space and bringing them into this conversation?
I think the key to this is just thinking about what young people need and what young people want. I think a lot of organisations go about this the wrong way. I think they go in with the thought of, oh, we want to engage young people and we want them to do this. And they sort of have this predetermined idea of what this looks like in mind. And I don't think it should be that way around. I think we should be coming at it from what can we do to support young people with what they want to do and what they want to sort of campaign on. So for me, it's about sort of thinking about what they need. So they're going to need sort of a social atmosphere. They're going to need something that's going to give them sort of some sort of experience to talk about. And it's going to need to give them an outlet for their voice and their sort of beliefs and values. And I think we need to go in with that approach as an organisation. You need to sort of think about how you can give them a platform rather than tagging them onto what you're doing already.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I think it was beautiful when it was me was talking about before the project. I think actually empowering young people to do it for themselves is a lot more powerful. Being then, obviously, as well, you kind of spent time in secondary school, which is obviously where it's your first conversations thinking about careers and moving forward. Have you noticed, even though you kind of weren't doing that before, but is that becoming more and more of a conversation that young people are having, that the job that they do in whatever industry, they actually want to make sure that it is being environmental conscious, that it is thinking about not just kind of profit, but it's thinking about how can they be doing better and what can they be doing better and wanting to bring about that change themselves. I mean, do you think that's a conversation happening more and more?
I think definitely, yeah, because I know when I was teaching, I did see that there was an eco group formed at the school I was in, and I noticed that was just so far away from what my experience of high school was. Like, there was nothing around quite like that back in sort of my day. And I think it's fantastic that young people are getting involved with that. They are wanting to do something about it. And I think really the question we need to be asking is, what can we do more to sort of support them towards those careers? Because for me, I didn't know my job even existed when I started out. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. They don't know what jobs are in the environmental sector. They don't know what they need to do to get there. I didn't come from a conservation background. I studied English. And then I sort of thought when I got to university, have I just missed out on an entire sector? Can I get into the environment sector if I've not done a conservation degree? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. There's so many different roles like communications, youth engagement, community engagement. There's so many different things for young people to get involved with. But I just sort of question whether they know it's even there. And how can you aim for a career if you don't even know it exists? So I think we really need to be looking at giving more support to young people on where they want to go, what they want to do, and sort of how they can get there.
Does that responsibility then fall on the schools, the colleges, you know, and the young people's peers to make sure it's as you say, it's made obvious to them? It's weird. There's a similarity into kind of some of the work I do, which is acting, and I think still even now, acting's not kind of sold as a very serious career. I mean, it's a tough career, but it's still one, and I'm guessing it kind of feels like it's the same with that. So is the responsibility, do you think, on the education sector as well? Do they have a big role to play in this to make sure that it is a valid option for young people?
I think they've just got a role to play, but I don't necessarily think they have all the answers. Like as a teacher, I wouldn't have said I knew what to steer my students to at that point. So I think this is where really, like people like the Wildlife Trust, Friends of the Earth, RSPB, all of the groups like that, we could possibly start doing more to sort of get into schools and start telling people about what we do and what opportunities they have. And I think we're seeing some trusts starting to do that. And I think the more we do that, the more we're going to help inform those young people and help them get sort of towards a green job, really.
Yeah, absolutely. James, so great to have your insight today, and I think as well, especially coming from a teaching background, it's really brilliant to get that insight. So thank you so much. I've had a lovely comment that's coming from a fellow James, actually. James Warren, who says, really enjoying listening to the panel on green things. And totally agree with what James is saying there, especially young people taking on greener roles moving forward. And we're going to have a slight pause now while we watch a brilliant video, which comes from the president of the Wildlife Trust, the fantastic Liz Bonin. Now, Liz was with Max Lawson from the London Wildlife Trust a little while ago, and they had a discussion about Max's role within the trust and how he got there.
I'm catching up with Max now from the London Wildlife Trust. Max, I'm really delighted to be able to talk to you. Tell me about your role.
So yeah, I'm the Assistant Project Officer on the Great North Wood projects.
So tell me a little bit about the journey that got you to work with the London Wildlife Trust.
So, I had a degree in zoology. It was all about the animals. And I moved to London, which you think if you want a job in wildlife conservation, London is not the place. I was like, where is my job? I've got a degree. But no, it doesn't work like that. So yeah, I had a job at London Zoo. I was in the gift shop, so close yet so far. I kind of did that for 9 months, and I was like, trying to find my feet. And then the lockdown hit, and I think that was kind of reality check for lots of people, kind of, where am I? What do I actually want to do? And at this point, I'd already been volunteering. I did a volunteer day at London Wildlife Trust, which was amazing, in the Great North Wood, of course. And then the Keeping It Wild project at London Wildlife Trust is a youth engagement project. And I'd kind of seen it, and then I saw it on Instagram, and I was like, you know what? It was all about engaging with nature, meeting other young people who are interested in nature, and I just you had to apply for it. So I applied for it, and I was like, oh, you know what? We'll see. And then I got it. So yeah, that was like a 6-week course, and really amazing, just learning about nature in the city and kind of using photography and media, how it all kind of collates. So I did that, and then as it was coming to an end, I was talking to someone, and they were like, did you know about the traineeship? And I was like, no, I've never heard of that. And it was a traineeship, so it was like a 3-month crash course in wildlife conservation in London, and I applied for it and I got it, which was kind of like, all the stars aligned. I don't know, if you don't apply for it, you don't get it. So, I threw my hat in there. Fast forward 9 months, this job came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's the Great North Wood. This is like exactly what I wanted. And again, I threw my hat in there, and here I am.
Look at you, coming back full circle, as you say, from that one day volunteering to now working on this incredible project. How are you finding the project so far?
Yeah, it's been a lot. We have like 22 different woodlands. There's lots to get your head around, but it's so amazing to discover these places. We were in another woods, and I just found this ash tree, which was like, it was just massive. And I was like, right, when I got my volunteers in, I was like, right, we're all going to the ash tree. We're all going to see it. And all of us just started hugging the tree, and it was just, it was
I'm
magic.
big into hugging trees.
Yeah,
I'm all about that. Next
same.
time I come, you and I are going to hug that ash tree.
Absolutely.
You're just filled with joy and an infectious passion for the natural world. You really are. You're a perfect person for the Wildlife Trust. What advice would you have for any young person who loves nature, would like to be more connected to it, and is not necessarily, that close to a huge countryside?
people think that you have to be in this space to be a conservationist, whereas I think a conservationist is who you are, not what you do. And I think just immerse yourself in the world. You know, even watching things like David Attenborough, you know, BBC, these amazing nature shows, they are connecting you with nature. You don't need to be out in the space. Obviously, it's amazing to come and see nature in its home, but just kind of, you know, doing what you can, very much into like nature connection, and just take 5 minutes extra on your commute.
Max, thank you so much. That's great advice. We're hugging that tree next time I come.
Absolutely.
But thanks for chatting to me today.
No, thanks so much.
Liz Bonn in there, who is definitely one of my nature heroes indeed, who was chatting to Max there, who was from the London Wildlife Trust, talking about his journey and how he got there. Right, let's open up this to our group discussion now. It's one of my favourite parts of any conversation that I get to chair. And I'm going to go right back to the start, because Eleanor presented an incredible, astute and very insightful point, talking about when we're looking at a green job, I think fundamentally what we need is actually a whole societal and system change where everything exists within that's kind of a green system in which we exist in, and then from there every job is almost a green job. But Eleanor, I'll start with you then, because kind of you opened up this brilliant conversation. And what you were saying at the start, when we're looking at that kind of massive societal system change, what are the ways in which you think we can strive to making that happen? And then off the back of that, of course, focusing on the empowering and making sure the opportunity is there for young people when we're moving into this new world, which we definitely desperately need.
Oh gosh, easy question then. Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I have all the answers, and I think this is why we have things like Parliament and working groups, is because you need a lot of minds there to tackle these big issues. But I think, again, just going back to what is the root cause of these big issues, and I think it's greed and wealth and profit again. What we hear is growth, growth, growth. And I think even the conservation sector is guilty of doing it. We want to grow. We've got this many members. We want to grow. We want to grow. We want to grow. And I think, what are we growing to? When do we stop? So I think the first step would be slowing down. And yeah, taking it from there, really, just trying, again, prioritizing things over growth and wealth. So prioritizing regenerating the natural resources, but also regenerating people's love for the work they do. I think we've seen through COVID a lot of the great resignation, as the media has coined it. So there's a reason for that. So are we working too hard? Are we being pushed to our limits? So I think it's just taking everything, slowing down a little bit is probably be my first step. And bringing young people along on the journey. I mean, young people will always come into the workforce. So there's no kind of stopping that. I think just creating those pathways, like Hannah was saying, I completely agree, where it's not just certain types of people going into certain types of roles. You know, we need to make, you know, coming into what you describe as a green job an easy pathway from people from all different walks of life, and then also not valuing one type of green job over another. And I think also being really realistic about what's a low pollution and a low carbon impact job, because potentially you could own a butcher's and live above it and have quite a low carbon job because you're not commuting, and it could be your local meat and you could run your shop on solar power, or you could work for the Environment Agency, but drive 4 hours a day, so have a really high carbon output. So I think it's just like reimagining what green is and actually looking at the impact of jobs rather than the title of them.
I was going to ask, actually, because as you kind of said there, specifically trying to define, you know, what it is and what it entails is difficult. And one of the questions from one of our listeners, Greg, is how would the panelists then define a truly green job, and would they concede the necessity for varying shades of green? That's kind of carrying on from your point there. I don't know if someone wants to try and tackle that answer from the panel. Mia, possibly?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely, as you said, the shades of green thing is really important. especially initially, we're not going to get every job to be completely sustainable, completely focused on wildlife. That's just not how society works, unfortunately. But I think if we could slowly turn every job more green, that's really important. And jobs that you might not expect so much, so like manufacturing, design, production, things like that, that don't always get talked about, if they could start to become more sustainable, which they definitely can be. And we as consumers are encouraged to be more sustainable. So really the corporate side of it also needs to be helping with that by becoming more sustainable themselves, because everyone's, got a job. A job is a part of everyone's life. So yeah, I think shades is important, but if we can just make everything more greener over time, that will hopefully help in the long run.
What about for your total agreement, Hannah, to yourself? I mean, how would you? I mean, your role covers a lot of bases, and you work with a variety of people. How would you then define yourself a green job, so to speak?
Yeah, good one. A good question. I think it's so variable. Like I studied ecology and conservation at university and have done other conservation roles. And when I first started at AFC, I was doing a different job, and then I've moved into this communications role. And I think actually, like what I was saying before about it is a mindset within yourself. Like you could be a hairdresser and create a completely circular, sustainable business. You could work in music and do that as well. So I think there's that element of it, the individual element. But I think ultimately a green job is one that prioritises protecting and improving the environment around us, and not, taking from it, extracting from it more than you are giving back, to kind of promote environmental and also help, like human health. Like we are part of the environment, we're not separate from it. So I think that's like probably how I would define it. But yeah, the shades of green thing, like you can work for an organisation that is a really green organisation, or you could work in an extractive organisation like an oil mining company and be part of, you could be potentially trying to make them more green, although arguably I don't think that could be considered a green job because it's an extractive industry. But you get what I mean. Like it's kind of, it varies, is what Eleanor was saying. Like it's what are the metrics you're using to measure it. But I think ultimately, yeah, it really kind of for us comes back to prioritise protecting and improving the environment for like nature's sake and the intrinsic value of nature, but also for people and how we relate to it.
Yeah, I think you've advanced that very well there, Hannah. Thank you. Jack, off that then, if we're looking at these varying shades of green, and obviously we're striving to make sure that in all work, in all industries, in all places, that there is very much at the heart of it a very eco-conscious, nature-conscious, I guess, morality kind of structure at its foundation. Do you see, we kind of touched upon it before then, does there need to be a change in vocational training? We spoke about that the kind of opportunities need to be presented, but are we seeing signs that colleges, apprenticeships, universities, even down at school, are including these green issues? Or do you think that is also something that needs to change at the root of it?
I mean, I think there's like the starts of stuff happening there. You've got the natural history GCSE that's just coming in, but I think, yeah, like you said, we need more vocational routes. We need different approaches for getting people into these jobs. It doesn't have to be a degree. That seems to be the most common way people get into this sector, and it shouldn't be that way. We could be having more apprentices. We could be having more trainees, interns. It doesn't have to be that you go to a degree and you've got to do this, that, and the other. It's just hurdles really that we're jumping through, and it's really sort of lowering the pool of people that we're going to have. Like, you're not going to get the most diverse range of people by doing that. So I think that's part of it. And I think the other thing to think about is like, consider where you're starting from in your career. Like, I think most of my friends, we started off with like part-time job in college. And where do we go? We tend to go into retail, or we tend to go into like hospitality, food and drink, something that allows sort of shift work around sort of your studies really. Why can't we have more jobs in the conservation sector or the environment sector that fit in that way? Why does it have to be a full-time role? Can it not be like some sort of part-time job that you can do for maybe like equivalent of 1 day a week, that's basically getting you a little bit of knowledge and experience in that role before you actually go into it? Why does it have to be you have to go into a job and do something you don't really want to do? just to earn a bit of money and then you go on to do your proper career. It shouldn't be like that. It should be, so if you want to go into it, there should be an opportunity for you there, and we should be looking to create them.
And if those opportunities aren't there, what do you think we can, how do we go about creating those opportunities? I'm always reluctant to try and be like, well, if they're not doing it, how do we do it? But sadly, that's the world that we're in. How can there be things that we're doing to try and put pressure on these companies or on these organisations or on these industries to do that? I mean, this is to everyone. Or James, I can begin with you. Can you think of a way in which we can maybe kind of enforce that in a way, or how can we?
I mean, I think it's got to, first of all, start with funding, because I think a lot of companies obviously think in terms of money, profit. So if you're providing sort of funds specifically to do that, we've sort of seen some start to emerge, but I think we need to see more and more variety in routes. So that's a starting point. And then I think from our end of things, like from the NGO side, charities, we could definitely be sort of going into schools more, sort of providing sort of more sort of flexible positions. I think now we're in the area of like flexible working. We could definitely start to have people working outside of core hours. Like we do tons of work on evenings and weekends still, like community engagement work. Why does it have to be a full-time member of staff that's doing that? Could it not be a part-time sort of student that's doing that around their studies, around sort of something else that they're doing, just so they can get that experience? So I think we could definitely provide more opportunities there.
Picking up on that, there was a great question that came in from Nikki Team. She's called Nikki. I was calling you guys Team. She's not called Nikki Team. Sorry. But to my team today, Nikki said it often feels, though, that green jobs are less valued or less rewarded, which I think very much ties into everything we've said so far. So how do we then overcome this? Is that you, Mia? Do you want to give it a go?
I mean, obviously, I've not had what would be considered a green job myself yet, what we're still being at uni. But I think we can talk the talk all we want, but I think just paying people more, I think it's such a joke in the industry that, oh, you're never going to even earn enough to pay any of your student loans off or whatever. I think they just need to be paid more. I don't know if that's through legislation. I don't know how that would work, but there can be lots of other rewards that aren't necessarily actually rewards, but just look good on job advertisements. But I think just higher wages, especially in a cost of living crisis, is what's needed at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to just say I totally agree with you, Mia. Having the green job should not be a sacrifice. It should be enticing. Or if the industry can't afford to pay you more, then 4-day work week. So then you have that extra day, because you can still get, the amount of productivity in those 4 days, and then have that extra day to either, volunteer or get an extra job for that extra income. But I think there has to be some sort of change if you want to keep good workers within the industry without them having to really struggle. And I think Hannah was going to maybe jump on that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to, I think I totally agree with both of you. Like, I think pay is absolutely needs to kind of be a real consideration. And I think that especially when you're thinking about how you entice people who are from a different background or have studied something different or have different expertise, it can often be really challenging if you want to move into a green job and you're like, oh, cool, well, I'm faced with a massive pay cut. That's great. But I think also, I don't know, like I find my job really rewarding in a lot of ways, but I think that I don't know if I necessarily like agree with the question in terms of it being like not enticing. I think that there's a lot of kind of undercurrent of different movements and really interesting stuff going on. And I have conversations with people in loads of different industries, like the music industry. I've worked with people on projects that they do with young people, with artists. We work with loads and like different organizations. Actually, I think what's really exciting about it as an industry, and I think if you can do this as an organization, like be really flexible and be really open to working with different people from different industry, and kind of just trying stuff out, because like, why not? If it doesn't work, then you learn from it, and if it does work, then that's something that's really interesting that might connect you with a group of artists or a local community group, or a musician or somebody else that actually moves move the topic onwards, but also like shifts the culture around what is a green job and like what are green jobs even in the conservation sector. Like they don't have to be this prescriptive thing. Our connection with nature doesn't have to be this prescriptive, like, specific thing. We can actually just be really open and do it in a different way. And I think that's quite exciting. And yeah, that's definitely something that we try and do at Action for Conservation. And yeah, that was kind of my addition.
We're doing it. No. I think well, between all those answers there, and it was kind of what you said before as well, Eleanor. Actually, I think when you get to speak it out within a group, we get to cover a few of the areas in which we know we need to see improvements. But obviously, the biggest role, one of the biggest roles in this whole conversation, in the whole climate conversation, are our governments. And I'm sure that you'll all feel pretty strongly at the moment about our government. I wondered then, let's just put it on the table. What do you want to see more as young people, and from what you've heard from young people, what do we need to see from our governments and from these leaders, to actually bring about this kind of shift that we're talking about in a big sense, but particularly when it comes to the future of young people, about what jobs are they going to take, what world are they going to inherit, what would we like to see from our governments?
I think just any sort of recognition of the crisis we're in would be just a brilliant start. With the candidacy going on at the moment for the Prime Minister position, there's been basically no talk at all about green jobs as, or any sort of climate change type stuff at all. Like, I've seen maybe one or two things, but it's so much about taxes and other things that, do matter, but seem to be more bureaucratic than anything else. And I'd like to see them, while fighting this campaign, acknowledge that what matters to voters is climate change and acknowledge that it's a big deal. That would be a great start.
Beautiful, Mia. We'll come to you, Eleanor.
Yeah, I was building on Mia's point as well. Like, it's not just governments. We have to remember that we also have Parliament. Like, government is just, I think we use it as a broad term because government is just a very small part of our elected MPs. And we also do have the House of Lords, which, even old-fashioned, they're actually quite useful lately. And they have actually brought more environmental and kind of human rights to the attention that the government and Parliament are missing. So I think getting to know who is running our country and countries, if we're talking globally, is really important. One thing that I do with my young people is run UK Parliament and government workshops, and you can get them for free as well. I'd really highly recommend them if you work with any young people, to understand who you can contact, how you can contact them, how you can set up petitions, how you can gain the attention if your MP isn't interested in what you have to say. There's actually working groups. So there's one for environment and there's one for animal rights that the House of Lords members and Parliament MPs join, and you can contact them and they will bring the topic to attention. So I think, first of all, people don't know who to contact about issues. So I think education on that, and then mobilising government is, if enough people in your constituency say, I'm interested in this, I care about this, they have to listen because they want to be re-elected. So I think, just getting more people to take political action, like soft political action, doesn't have to be really controversial. And I wrote to Kat Smith, my MP, the other week, and she wrote back within a week. But if I sent her an email, it'll probably take a month. But I hand wrote her a letter about the climate crisis, and she wrote back a really heartfelt letter, actually, and signed it. So, like, just doing actions like that to get the attention of the person who makes big decisions for your area is a step that every single person can take. And then government will hopefully mobilise.
That's such a great point. I'm so glad that was covered there. Thank you. Yes, over to you, mate. Go on, James.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about what we want to see from the government, I think a lot of the time we see them saying the right things, but then it's not following through with the actions. Like, we're seeing a rolling back in environmental standards that's just appalling at the moment. And a lot of my job is around trying to tell MPs what's going wrong, because we sort of think of MPs, politicians, as being these people who know everything. A lot of the time, actually, they're just kind of like you and me. They don't necessarily know as much as we think they do, in a way. And that's because they're not an expert in the field. So I'm talking to them, trying to advise them, trying to tell them what the problems are. So there's that aspect of it. But in a way, I kind of think our political system is not geared towards tackling sort of the environmental sort of crisis that we're in, because our political system is very adversarial. It tends to pit one party against the other, and that's it. It's not about building consensus. And I think what I see from like people, no matter what age you are, no matter what you're doing, what your background is, I think a lot of people would agree that we need to do something about the climate and nature crisis. And yet that's not reflected in our political system. So I think we need to be looking at sort of a fairer way to sort of elect our sort of parliament, and we need to be looking at sort of electoral reform. It doesn't necessarily seem like the natural solution to climate and nature crisis in the UK, but I think that's an important part of it, because if you've got parties talk about what you've got in common, surely that's going to emerge as a point of common ground. Because when I meet MPs from different parties, you see that's actually something they tend to agree about. Nature is important. So if we had a political system that fostered that sort of collaboration, we'd be in a much better place, I think.
Agreed. And Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone's been saying. I think, Eleanor, what you're saying about people being informed of how can they actually speak truth to power in their local MPs and their local councils is really, really important. And I think that something that's, I guess what's interesting with this whole prime ministerial election is like, it's not really an election, it's a party election. So it doesn't particularly like surprise me that they're kind of the way they're speaking to their party to get elected to be the next prime minister, because they're going to run along those kind of party lines and what was in their manifesto in 2019. And I think when we're looking at this whole system, you know, one of the big problems is that we live in a capitalist society, or, you know, you can look at it as a problem. If everything is to generate wealth at the expense of everything else of people and planet, then that is a massive thing that they probably don't want to touch on to talk about the climate crisis. So I think that's like really interesting because there's so many people talking about it, and particularly when I work with young people, and young people are talking about it all the time. It's like so on their agenda, and they're really worried about it, but also I think they're really angry and they're really motivated to do something about the climate crisis. So what I think is interesting is, even with this government or even the next government, I think something that they're going to have to start considering is, okay, we're going to have to do something because these young people are going to be voting at some point, and they're going to still be asking those questions because it's still going to be their future that's going to be impacted. And a lot of the young people I work with are really adamant that they would love to have votes at 16, especially at this point in time. And we've even discussed, like, is 16 too old? Would you want to have a vote younger than that? Like, they want to learn more about political systems in school and how that they can actually have a voice. And I think that that is a really cool and kind of interesting like aspect to this, because really we could embed a lot of this across all topics in our education system, not just like having one nature GCSE. We could embed environmental issues across all topics, and that like also all of that feeds into our how we live our lives and our politics. So I think that's kind of how I see like the next couple of years playing out. I think it's going to be a bit of an interesting time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all plays out. Fingers crossed it plays out in the right way. Off this then, Val Siddiqui's dropped us a little comment saying totally agree on right and central government, but in his experience is that local councils are more receptive as well, of course. I mean, don't forget as well, we had some local council elections not too long ago as well. But Jessica sent in a question which feels really nice to add on to this, and I should have time to squeeze in one more. It was Janet, not Jessica, who said, OK, then what is a good question, or what should we be asking or put into our local MP when coming to this, and to keep them on their toes? What do we think, the people are sitting there going, all right, I've never wrote to my local MP. What do you think they should be saying? Go on, go on, James.
Yeah, so I think writing to your MP is a tricky one because it really depends who your MP is. Some of them are really active, some of them engaged, some of them will only ever send you a generic response back that's been written by the Conservative or Labour Party or Lib Dem HQ. You don't tend to necessarily get very individual responses very often. So my sort of thinking is you need to sort of time it so you're contacting people at the same time about a particular issue. So whenever you've got like a big campaign coming from the Wildlife Trust, we tend to like put out a big call to action saying, we want lots of people to contact their MP, because when you get lots of people doing the same thing, that's when it starts to get attention and noticed. So that's sometimes a way you can get perhaps a bit more of a personal response. So I don't necessarily think it's just about the question. I think it's about the timing and trying to sort of combine all voices, so we're speaking together and we're demanding action as a sort of a group of people rather than just as individuals.
Nice. Anyone want to add to that as well? Yeah, Eleanor?
So I'm stealing this advice from two people on my youth council, Emma Greenwood and Alex Kennedy, who are youth MPs in Manchester and Bury and climate activists. And they, since the age of 15, have had a relationship with their MPs, and just making your MP know who you are. So going to their surgeries, continue to invite to them, even if you don't get an answer back. And Alex also made like a template for us. So she was saying, do your research, like compliment them on something that they have voted for. So you can look at the website, They Work For Us, and you can look at their voting history. And it might say that they voted for Climate Change Act. So you say, that's great that you voted for the Climate Change Act. I know that a vote for letting more beavers into the UK is coming up. I'd love if you voted in support of this, and this is why. So don't just write a generic email or letter. Do your research, look at their voting history, and ask them for a specific action, and give them a call to action. They usually like that. Again, they're very busy people, and like James said, they don't actually know everything, so they might have no idea what you're talking about. So give a bit of background and give them a call to action. And if you're not sure, again, check out your local nature group and see what they're asking people to do, and then you'll get the confidence to build it yourself.
That's incredibly intelligent answers there, guys. And I actually think if we can just soundbite that and send it out to most people, I think it would stand them in good stead, because I think that's information everyone needs to know. We've got a few minutes left, but I wanted to put this to some of my panel quickly, because it came from Helen Whittle, who's watching. And Helen has worked for years in the environmental education. Engaging children and young people has always been a thing, as we know. But her question is, how do we stop it wearing off? Which I think is actually a really important point, because it's getting, once you've engaged them, how do we keep them engaged and within this space? I think that's a great kind of question to round up, because obviously if we keep them engaged, that could then maybe lead them to finding a job or wanting to make sure that the work they're doing is centred around being more kind to the planet, to people, and putting that first. What do we have any little tips for Helen there? What do we think, guys? On Hannah?
I mean, it's such a hard one, isn't it? Because I think that young people, like, they will grow up and they will make like different life choices, and maybe that's not always going to be keeping them in the sector. But I think within the work that we do, we always try and like create really fun, transformative experiences for young people in nature. So it's something that is, you know, a memory that's really rooted in a place near where they've live or have grown up, in a time with other young people, and that those memories actually, you know, I'm sure we all hold really dear, are lots of memories from when we were younger. And I think that is really important, and not being too prescriptive with how they engage with the natural world, I think, is also really important. And I think, yeah, you provide them with opportunities and you meet them where they're at. Like, I think there's a lot to be said for giving young people autonomy over what they're engaging with, how they're engaging with it, like what we're talking to them about, like what do they want to learn about, what do they want to hear more about, who do they want to hear from. I think all of those things, you know, you can just ask young people and they'll tell you. And if they don't want to hear about something, why? Like, there's a reason for that, and that is something that then you can kind of address. So yeah, I think it's about being holistic, and it's about like meeting them where they're at, and kind of not being judgmental of things that they're interested in. Like, you can love, you know, I don't know, social media and making TikToks, and also care about the environment. Those two things are not, you know, they can coexist. So I think that's the kind of approach I think is really helpful.
It's a very difficult one to answer that. I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it? But I think you've definitely given us some form of a road to go down, and hopefully that as well will have helped of course there as well, Jennifer. So thank you, Helen. Sorry, guys. I don't know how it's 8:30, but it is. Before I say a massive thank you to you all, but this has been a very fascinating, hopefully a really insightful discussion for you all, and this discussion could not have been made possible without the kind of brilliant and the informative and very in tune panel that have been with me this evening. So I want to begin by saying a massive thank you to Eleanor Lampard from Youth Advocacy Officer for Lancashire Wildlife Trust. I want to say a massive thank you to Hannah Ryan-Leah, Communications and Digital Campaigns Officer at Action for Conservation. James Melling, who began his work as a secondary teacher, is now a Wilder Campaigns Officer at Cheshire Wildlife Trust and also a big part of their youth programme over there. And the brilliant Mia Cross as well, who's the Keeping It Wild member from Nottingham Wildlife Trust. To my brilliant panel, all the love and all the appreciation, and I don't think it can be underestimated. The work that you do and continue to do is incredibly valuable and really is out there as a beacon of hope and inspiration, and you really are being that change that we need to see in the world. So as someone who's passionate about the planet, thank you so much for all your work, and please don't stop. Sadly, I will not be joining you next month. I will be tuning in though for the wildlife. Craig will be back. It's on the 23rd of September, and in our next live, we're going to be discussing who are we living an insect apocalypse. The big old questions getting answered here on Wildlife. So it's going to be live from the Get Cumbria Buzzing Pollinator Conference, and you can now get your tickets to join us in person from Carlisle if you want to be there, or you can also watch us online via the website. If you just have a little look in the chat box for the link, it's on there. Now, I want to say, please don't forget as well to follow the Wildlife Trust, or wherever the Wildlife Trust is in your area. Please get involved and support their work. And you can find out loads on social media to keep up to date with all their campaigns and work. And from myself, it really is one of my greatest privileges to become an ambassador for the Wildlife Trust over the last year or so. And I think, you know, given the work that they do all around the country, it really is critical work, and actually it's work that needs to be supported more. And it being just a little small part of that is amazing. I get to be a part of these discussions, and you meet the brilliant people involved in the trust around the UK. And as I say, you're all real beacons of hope, action and inspiration. And when we're looking to young people, I'm rounding off on the conversation that we've been having, kind of opportunities for young people and can every job be green? I think we really have to start by, as you say, looking for that kind of cohesive full change. You know, let's look at the 360 picture, not just the individual picture. Let's always put the planet and people first rather than profit and selfish gains. And I think finally, let's empower young people. Let's put them at the forefront of the conversation. Let's equip them with the tools and let them run with it, because I think you've heard here today and you can see around us that young people really are going to be the ones that can turn it around and change it. What we have to do is make sure we're doing all we can to help them do just that. So a massive thank you again to my panel. Thank you to everyone for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all soon. And I will apologise as well, this has been a bit more of a podcast rather than a visual one, but hopefully you've enjoyed the listen. Have a lovely evening, guys. Peace and love.